Hey guys, so it's time for part 2 of my response to Matt CMG's video on defending the Legend of Korra. And I want to say this before I get started. I will do the rest of this, but I want to say this. In one of my recent live streams, I was linked by a viewer, the Twitch stream of Matt CMG actually reacting to my video. I didn't expect him to notice it or care, but he actually watched it, and as I watched it, hey guys, let me just say this. I'm big enough to admit when I'm wrong about something and when I've learned something. As I said at the ending of my video, I'm always willing to learn, and after watching his Twitch, I did learn a lot. There was a lot there that I didn't take into account. For example, I concede, Matt, that you are right. When I argued that Korra could not have learned all 3 of the elements so quickly and easily by the time she was a teenager. But you're right, we see Roku and Aang doing that. And you also made a good point that when I said, where did she learn how to bend at 4 years old? You're right, we don't know exactly how we know a person can bend and how another person can't. There has to be some kind of hint. So, fair enough, those are good points. And there were several other good points. I don't want to sit here and make all of them because we'd be here a while, and I don't want to just debunk his reaction of my video. That would be ridiculous. But what I do want to say is, while I do stand by a few of my points, particularly in the case of certain areas where I don't feel like Korra really adequately earned something, and even then, Matt was also big enough to acknowledge points that I made, which, again, very big of you. That was very, very nice. That was very respectful. But there were areas that I got wrong, areas that I could have improved on, and actually, yeah, I feel like I respect the show a little more now that some of these misconceptions have gone away. Does that mean that I think the show's great now? Well, no, not necessarily. I still stand by the fact that Avatar: The Last Airbender, in my opinion, is the superior show, but I see Korra a little differently now. I have a bit of a different mindset for it. And in fact, I was so blown away with the way that Matt treated my video and with some of his points that I actually thought, I don't even want to continue the video series. I don't even want to continue reacting to his video because that would be low form. But then he said in his video twice, I want to see the rest. So out of respect for that, I will do the rest. So here we go, guys. Part 2.
But we're still a team! The new Team Avatar!
We got your back, Korra.
Aside from Korra, I've seen plenty of gripes with the other characters of the main cast, and I think the 3 that get the brunt of it are Mako, Bolin, and Asami, and in some cases, rightfully so. There are certainly points where these characters aren't utilized very well or don't have a lot going on. You know, this is something that I have agreed with in the past. I've made videos about this kind of thing before, but I no longer really 100% agree with that. These characters are by no means perfect at all, but they each serve specific purposes, and some have very subtle arcs that I feel a lot of people don't notice or talk about. Let's start with Bolin, who from what I've seen gets the least shit from people. Bolin is seen by many as just a discount Sokka. He's a character who deals with his own insecurities while also being the comic relief character. It's a fair comparison, but that's about as far as it goes in my opinion. Sometimes he fits the role of the comic relief, other times he's the dynamic ally, and he works in both of those roles because he's funny in a very awkward way, but is also very trusting and loyal to his friends. Both his comedic moments and his more serious moments work because of the fact that the character is so genuine and honest with everyone. The comedy comes from when he tries to not be that, and even when he isn't. And his more emotional moments work because you know he's not just saying things to say them. He actually means what he says. For example, look at season 4 where he apologizes to Opal. It's a genuinely heartfelt scene, and it only works because Bolin is such a genuine character. Again, it seems to me that Bolin is one of the characters that naysayers hate the least, but I figured I'd address it here.
I think if I could point out one of the biggest problems I ever had with The Legend of Korra, it's the missed opportunities the show had to really show good and creative ideas. Bolin, I think, is a great example. Bolin first was introduced as an honestly good character to me. He had a good personality. He was actually funny. He was actually kind of endearing, and he reminded me a lot of myself to some degree, someone who's upfront and honest about their feelings most of the time. He pursued Korra and in turn won her affections until Korra pulled a page from the forbidden book of Bella Swan and went after her brooding vampire lover. Mako. This wouldn't bother me too much, except that when she chooses Mako as her new boy toy, Bolin's character, at least for season 1 through 2, does a complete 180. Rather than being an endearing and reasonable character, he becomes almost a one-note idiot most of the time. Sure, he gets a good line or good moment every now and then, but for a lot of it, he just feels like he's just a punchline waiting to happen. Like, take the moment where Bolin sees Korra kiss Mako. He starts crying, but the crying is done almost comedically. I know we're supposed to feel sorry for him, but I couldn't help but cringe a little at it. And maybe that's just me, but I cringed. And then after that, immediately after that, we see him in a bar or in a restaurant booth just bawling his eyes out in what is sincerely looking comedic. I'm kind of like, why am I supposed to laugh? I should feel sorry for him. But again, that may be just my response. Honestly, I agree with most everything that was said here. That you said, Matt. I think that all of your points about Bolin are pretty valid. I think that I don't really have a lot to say against it. I just felt like I would add, to me, the reason Bolin didn't get me so excited or get me so interested was because after that incident where Korra chose Mako over him, kind of stringing him along, he just turned into a comic relief character until season 3. In season 3 and 4, Bolin found a new girlfriend in Opal, and he clearly started to become a better character again, but at the same time, I still wasn't as endeared to him. I think it's because I didn't know how to feel about him at that point. He spent so much time with so little identity or purpose and even character that suddenly throwing him with Opal felt almost wrong. But that's just me. Until season 3 and 4, I just didn't really have much of a liking for Bolin because I think he was a missed opportunity.
Next, let's look at Asami. Let's be real. Asami in Season 1 was literally just a means to an end, in the sense that she was only really kept around because the writers liked her, so they kind of forced her into a love triangle subplot with Korra and Mako in the latter half of the season. She had a little bit going on in Season 1 with realizing that her father was working with the Equalists and all that, and this carries over into Season 2 with her trying to keep her company afloat. Other than that though, she really doesn't do much or have much of an arc. Much like in Season 1, Asami in Season 2 really only existed to give Korra and Mako some unnecessary relationship trouble. She had her place in these seasons, don't get me wrong, but she was mostly an unnecessary addition. However, what I feel Asami doesn't get enough credit for are the roles she plays in Seasons 3 and 4. She is much better utilized in these seasons, and it's because they use her to give us insight into what our main character is feeling. At the start of Season 3, we see Asami and Korra have formed a friendship that is maintained for the remainder of the series, and the writers use this as an opportunity for Korra to have a friend that she can bounce ideas off of. They do this by pairing the two up in these dynamic duo type situations and having scenes of the two just talking. Her presence clearly serves a purpose here, and an important one at that. In Seasons 3 and 4, Asami fits the role of the confidant. It's always important for your main character to have someone to confide in, and though Korra has had that in other characters such as Tenzin, it's also important for her to have a character who's more of a peer, someone who she can relate to on a more casual level. Asami doesn't do much in these seasons, much like the previous two, but the difference here is that she has a purpose for being injected into the story. In Season 4, she even gets her own subplot, which isn't focused on too heavily, but still does a good job at further humanizing her and wrapping up the things that they set up in the first season.
Asami, again, to me, was created for the same reason that Cho Chang was created in Harry Potter. To be a love interest. She's overly sexy, has a rich daddy, but still loves the little guys. She's supportive, she's generous, and she's smart and witty. What's not to like? And I think that was kind of my problem. I'm afraid Korra, by your own admissions, was unlikable and a selfish brat in Season 1. Then along comes Asami, who is the opposite. And I geared myself more to Asami, honestly. I thought Asami was much more likable than Korra, at least in Season 1, and the story was forcing us to follow Korra's story, because I just got done seeing Korra torch the airbending training thing that Tenzin was using, throw tantrums when she wasn't getting her way, getting into pissing fights with Mako. I'm kind of like, and here's a girl who is genuinely seeming like a good character, willing to support the team. I don't know. I liked her more. And after that, you're right. Asami had little to do other than be a confidant for Korra, but I do want to point out your phrasing was injected into the story. She was inserted to play the role of confidant for Korra. Firstly, confidants aren't essential to character stories, at least in my opinion. I don't think they're necessary. They're good to add, but I don't think they're necessary. They are a useful role to play. And by God, I wish she just had more to do than be bestest buddies with Korra. I wish that she had larger character arcs. For a character like her, having only one or two very minor character arcs, I wanted to see more with her. And maybe it's because I'm still thinking back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, and maybe this is my fault. You know, you said earlier that a lot of people who don't like The Legend of Korra are just looking for rehashes of the first, and maybe I'm guilty of that. But in my opinion, when I look at the side characters in Legend of Korra, I keep thinking, you know, where's the dynamic? Where's the growth? Where's the character arcs? In each season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, we kind of see each of the side characters have their own mini arc. You know, Katara discovering Katara's necklace, for example. Her necklace was a major part of Season 1. And then Katara coming to grips with Aang learning earthbending and building up a rivalry or resentment towards Toph, where they're the two bicker a whole lot. And then in the third one, where she's coming to grips with falling in love with Aang and the fact that the war could be coming to an end. That's a lot of arcs, and major ones that are put out very well in the first show. With Asami and Bolin, okay, maybe not Bolin, because he had quite a few arcs, I'll admit. But with Asami, I'm sticking with Asami, I didn't see that much. She was just kind of there, and I was like, I wanted to see better out of her. But then again, that's just me. Asami is just a role. As you said yourself, she was injected to play a role, the girlfriend or confidant to our main character, as well as a romantic foil in season 1. While she does have a subtle character arc concerning her relationship to her father, it doesn't have a lot of overall bearing on the plot, at least not until the ending of season 4, and it doesn't alter her that much. If she didn't have that arc, would she have been very different? I don't think so. But again, a lot of this is subjective at this point. Moving on.
Lastly, let's look at Mako. I've been guilty of shitting all over this character in the past, and honestly, I don't know that I 100% agree with that stance anymore, because after looking at it a little bit more objectively, there's actually a lot more to appreciate about the character than I initially thought. My problem, and I think a lot of other people's problem with Mako, was that he was boring. He didn't do a whole hell of a lot past season 1, his presence in the first 2 seasons was to be Korra's love interest and nothing more, and he was barely in the last 2 seasons, especially season 4. They did him really fucking dirty there. Aside from not doing much, he also didn't have any noticeable character growth until the final season. However, this character growth, while originally a negative for me, is actually an arc that I found myself enjoying despite how subtle it is. After the events of seasons 1 and 2, with Mako dating Asami, then Korra, then Asami again, then Korra again, Mako goes into season 3 single and on weird terms with the ladies. They don't hold anything against him, but he's super awkward around them because he's obviously dated both of them before, so it's very uncomfortable for him. As a defense mechanism, Mako essentially becomes a stiff. He's platonic friends with both of them, but he doesn't want to show it, so he treats them as almost business partners and nothing more. This is brought up near the end of the season where Mako and Bolin's grandmother has that exchange with Korra and Asami at the Oasis, but it's pretty short. Fast forward to the final episode at Varric and Julie's wedding, and Mako tells Korra this.
I want you to know, I'll follow you into battle no matter how crazy things get. I've got your back. And I always will.
Which I think shows great growth for the character. He learned that he was being irrational and thinking that there was anything weird between him and his exes, and he finally accepts that at the end of the series, accepting that it's okay to have a platonic friendship with them. My only problem with this is that they didn't do a whole lot to show it, and Mako in general was sidelined for most of the final season, but other than that, this is subtle and effective character growth.
Mako, to me, never got good. I was never a huge fan of Mako. The point that you made with him having a subtle but good character arc, I'm not sure if I see it. That might be a bit of a stretch there, but I don't really think I see it that well. I mean, yeah, there are those awkward moments, but I think that's partially because the writers just didn't know what to do with him. You had this character who you set up in season 1 to be Korra's love interest, and now you're clearly setting Korra up to be with someone else, and now you don't know what to do with Mako. Do you get him with another girl that you haven't established? No, that's a little unbelievable. Do you have him kind of build up a gay relationship with someone else? No, we haven't really established that either. Let's just get him out of the frame quickly. Remind the audience that he's not getting back to Korra with one last little line about being friends, and then get rid of him. I don't know if they were intentionally going for an arc there. If they were, great, okay, but I didn't see it. My problem with Mako was he was such a blank slate. He was almost a nobody. He had so little outgoing personality. I can't really think of things that he liked or disliked or enjoyed. Or we get a sad backstory about his parents and about the scarf that he wears, but outside of that, I don't see a whole lot else in him. But again, I wasn't a big fan of Mako, and I admit that my perspective here is biased. So take that for what you will.
At the end of the day, though, what I say about these characters probably won't sway anybody. Much like the show itself, these characters have their flaws in the way they were written, but the shit all over them for those flaws is to ignore all the well-written parts about them. Too many people like to oversimplify these characters as the funny guy or the love interest. They're way more complex than that, as we'll see once we get into the...
People ask me a lot, because I love to write stories, what makes a good character. People ask me all the time what makes a good character, and I simplify it down into steps. But the first step that I say is, what do they want? What are they trying to accomplish? What is Bolin's main goal? What does he want? Is he working to achieve it? How? It's the same question for Mako and Asami. What do they seek? What are their goals? Let's compare this to the Last Airbender team. Sokka's goal is to be a brave soldier like his dad and to make sure nothing happens to his sister. He accomplishes this by leading the group, planning the invasion for the Fire Nation, actively seeking out the library so that he can find a weakness for the Fire Nation, and taking a forward role so that others don't have to. Katara's goal, at least at first, is to find closure for what happened to her mother, and then later gets closure in the 4th season, as well as to master waterbending and ensure that Aang does too. She does this by joining him on his journey to the North Pole, forcing the master to accept her as a student, and then joining Aang on his journey to train him. She also takes on the mantle of group mom for both humorous and serious matters. Toph's goal is to escape her parents' shadow, teach Aang earthbending, and experience the wider world. I'd say see, but that would be a little inappropriate. She does this by running away with Aang, teaching him her own unique form of earthbending, and being unapologetically mischievous, taking advantage of others around her in a way to make up for her own weaknesses as a blind child. I actually like that a lot about Toph. To kind of a side note, I really like that about Toph, the fact that she tries to scam other people in the 4th season by using her blindness and earthbending to trick people out of their money. I like that because this was good, subtle character writing. You know, she's always been seen as the weak one by her family. She's always been seen as weak, as lesser. She can't do anything. So she uses that to cheat other people, because who's going to expect a blind girl to cheat you out of all your money? I thought that was very clever. But you see the difference here. Maybe there are aspects of Mako, Bolin, and Asami that I'm overlooking, but just based on your own description of the characters, all I see are traits and tropes attributed, not really any direction. What was Mako's major goal? What was the big goal he wanted to accomplish? Well, you could argue maybe to find more about his family, maybe? Was that Bolin's goal too? I mean, was it to make money off of pro bending? Pro bending wasn't really a thing after season 1. What was Asami's goal? See, that's the thing. And please correct me. If you see where I got it wrong, if you see where they actually do have goals, let me know, because I didn't see it. I didn't see where they had goals or motivations or direction. I felt like they were there. And you said this actually in your Twitch response. You pointed this out, and I grant you this. I think you made a good point. I argued that Aang and Korra's endings were fundamentally different. Whereas with Aang, it was more about the relationships and team effort of what Aang did. Whereas with Korra, it wasn't so much about the team as it was Korra's accomplishments and character development. Fair point. But then I think the negative to that is that because of it being more about Korra's development, most of the characters are relegated to pillars who hold her up. They become characters who support her rather than characters who grow alongside her. Mako doesn't teach her firebending. Bolin teaches her some little nifty tricks to help her earthbending out in pro bending matches, but other than that doesn't help her out. Asami's a confidant, but then again, I don't know if Asami did any real growing alongside Korra outside of discovering her new sexual proclivities. Whatever the case, that's my stance on them. Honestly, I was going to skip over this one because I really don't disagree with much of what you said, but hey, if I'm doing each part, I'm going to do each part, and so this was my response to that. Don't really care much for these 3 characters. Honestly, I would rather talk about Tenzin, who I think was one of the best characters in the show. I loved Tenzin. Honestly, if I had to say the best thing about Korra, it would be Tenzin. His voice actor's great, his attitude is great, his stiff upper lippedness is kind of great. That's not even a word, but the way he just acts, I really liked Tenzin. I thought he was great. I really just didn't care for Mako, Asami, or Bolin. Didn't leave much of an impact with me. And maybe that's just personal, but that's me. Anyway, that's all for part 2, guys. I know this one wasn't especially long, but then again, the part wasn't especially long. So I will see you in part 3, where he talks about the villains. And as always, Matt, if you do another Twitch to this, I'll be glad to watch it. Someone send me a link. I'm always happy to learn more. Please, let me know. All right, guys, I will see you in the next part and in my next video. Take care.